Welcome to today's Seidokan Saturday. Today I'm just going to chat for a second about how much karate do you need to know. If you go back to the older, and I'm talking the roots and the history of karate, there are kata named after individuals because that kata identified the sum total of their approach to self-defense, kusanku or kongsankun. His kusanku form pretty much is the repository of all that he taught of his whole karate. Now, does that mean he didn't know other things? I don't know, I wasn't there. But his students taught his kata. Tokumine was exiled to an island and people went specifically to learn his bow system, and so we have Tokumine no kun. Did he know other bow forms or other things? I don't know, but Tokumine was his identifying kata or system of self-defense, his methodology for fighting using the bow. We have Sakugawa no kun. We have Chibana Sai. We have identifying kata that are associated with an individual, and it's typically because that kata or that form, whether empty-handed or kobudo, weapon form, identified this master's approach to fighting. We have then on the other end of that stick, people like Mabuni Sensei, the founder of Shito-ryu, a contemporary of Funakoshi, who not only did the forms, the kata that Funakoshi did, which is 20 or 24 kata in this Shotokan system without weapons, but Mabuni then also included all of the other kata from the Naha, from Tomari, from Shuri, all of the what we would consider the Goju-ryu, Shotokan, Ishinryu, all of those kata in some version is in the Shito-ryu system, and a broad range of kobudo. That's, numbering well into the 30s, 40s in total kata in the system of Shito-ryu, as opposed to the single kata of the older days, or even the Uechi-ryu, brought back by Kanbun Uechi, also known as Pangai Nun karate. The Uechi-ryu system, which originally had only, I think, 3 or 4 forms, now they may be up to 6 or 8, depending on which ryuha of Uechi-ryu you follow. But we went from 1 to 4 to 8 to 12 to 20 to 50. Now we have people studying a variety of other styles of martial arts and just kind of conglomerating all of them together. One of the things we need to understand when we do that is to separate whatever your core art, Seidokan for me, is from other arts that you may have studied, dabbled in, been exposed to, or whatever. Kajiano Sensei and a lot of the Pennsylvania East Coast Seidokan people are training a lot with Morales Sensei because he's there and accessible now, and as a result get a lot of Goju influence and perspective into their training. Does that mean that we're going to use Goju kata and now call it Seidokan? I would think not. Seidokan is going to be the core and always what it is, but the Goju will inform or give perspective on how to do our Seidokan techniques. There are those who've studied the Oyata pressure point system, Matt Kohler and some others notably who are very skilled in this area. Does that mean that they're no longer doing Seidokan? No, but that approach or that exposure flavors how they express their Seidokan. Ron Nick Sensei in Okinawa has exposure to so many because he lives there in Okinawa and associates with so many great instructors that colors his perspective and performance. And yet, even then, in the fighting approach, at least as I've seen it, correct me, Nick Sensei, if I'm wrong, but a lot of the kumite that they do is more kickboxing MMA style in terms of just free fighting. But then the self-defense, he still uses the core art that he was taught under Toma. The self-defense that uses the Tweedy and the basic 11 and the kata as the foundation of the self-defense as opposed to, quote, fighting. Juan Carbajal Sensei focused a lot on tournament-style kumite and kata performance, and so that colored his Seidokan. I have retained from the late 70s through the early 90s, Shaolin Kempo was my primary core art. And anybody who's watched any of the 250 videos knows that I incorporate some of those Kempo concepts, and it definitely flavors how I look at Seidokan, how I apply my Seidokan techniques. I look at it like a sculptor. So a sculptor with clay, specifically, or granite or whatever, but specifically with clay, there's a point where you have to add globs of clay onto your base foundation, and that at a certain point you start carving away the pieces of the clay to get to the sculpture that you have in your mind. I see the martial arts the same way. My core, my sculpture underneath is always my Seidokan. That's what I'm paring away at. But when I went to Carbone Sensei's seminar on Kobudo, I'm not going to be teaching Carbone Sensei's Kobudo as a part of my Seidokan. I may not even remember most of it, but some of the technical things that will apply, I'm going to retain and use those as a flavor to the Kobudo that I do. When I went to McCarthy Sensei's seminar, I don't know that I'm going to be a full-fledged Koryu Uchinari follower and learn his 36 drills, ukewaza, nagewaza, all of the different flow drills that he's created. I probably won't learn those and incorporate them as part of my teaching, because at a certain point I have enough going on in here that retention, much less perfection of any of those techniques, becomes really challenging and virtually impossible. You can dilute your karate by knowing or trying to know too much, rather than at a certain point focusing on getting to the core sculpture. It's also like when I taught Shakespeare in high school. I only had 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks tops to do a section on Shakespeare. There was no way I was going to cover everything that I'd learned in my collegiate courses over semesters of Shakespeare, or have the class read every Shakespeare play like I had to do in college. At a certain point, I had to say, okay, there's all this available knowledge. What am I going to teach that will be useful to my high school students? Karate is much the same. For my personal practice, I'm going to read all the Shakespeare plays that I can. I may memorize lines from a few. That's going to be my core Shakespeare knowledge. That's my Seidokan. All of the other Shakespeare plays, that's the Carbone Sensei seminar and the McCarthy seminar and the Kempo forms that I used to know and the Taekwondo forms that I no longer practice, and all of those other things which are going to color and inform my knowledge of the single or the couple of Shakespeare plays that I'm staying with as my core, but I have awareness and perspective because of those other things. I hope that made some sort of sense. I'm curious to know, in your Seidokan or whatever art that you practice, how much other things color and inform your core art. Are you trying to learn more stuff, or are you paring it down? Are you selecting? Carbajal Sensei was at one of my tests in St. George, and I used all of the self-defense techniques and things that I had accumulated, and said, wow, you require a lot of stuff for your test. And it's true to an extent, but mostly it was, here's the kata. I want you to know how to do something defensively with each move of the kata, aka bunkai or oyo bunkai. And then what I use to help you interpret that is the Kempo techniques that I teach, which then help you understand, and the wrestling that I teach, and the Muay Thai that I've done, and all of those things are a perspective that help me understand the Seidokan kata, which are the core of what I do. I hope that made some sort of sense. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for joining. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how much is enough or how much is too much. Do you work on paring it down and specializing in something? Are you mastering a kata or 2 kata that are your favorites? How much does the other stuff you've done color what you do? And understand that all through history, karate is a hybrid. Karate is never pure. Everybody from Okinawa back to China, every what we now call style or system has gathered, aggregated a variety of things into what has ultimately become their version of karate. My version of karate, Seidokan, colored by Kempo, informed with perspective from all of the other things that I have done and experienced. Thank you for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Next week, we're going to look at Sai, kata. And until then, let's keep practicing.